The wind cut across the ice like a knife. Dr. Laura Bennett pulled her hood tighter and watched the drilling equipment shake against the frozen ground. She had been in the Arctic for 6 weeks now, and every day felt colder than the last. But she loved this work. The ice held secrets that were millions of years old, and she was one of the few people on Earth who knew how to read them. Her team was small. Just 5 researchers and a handful of support staff, living in heated tents on the northern edge of Greenland. Their mission was simple: drill into the ancient ice, pull out core samples, and study what the frozen layers could tell them about Earth's past. It was slow work, but Laura found peace in it. The world was quiet out here. No phones ringing. No traffic, just the endless white horizon and the hum of machines. On the morning of the 43rd day, everything changed. Laura was inside the main tent, reviewing data on her laptop, when she heard shouting outside. She grabbed her coat and ran into the cold. Her lead technician, a young man named Kevin Morris, was standing by the drill site with a strange look on his face. "Something's wrong with the drill," he said. "It hit something." Laura walked over and looked at the monitors. The drill had been going down smoothly for days, cutting through layer after layer of ice. But now it had stopped. The readings made no sense. According to the instruments, the drill had struck something solid at 312 meters below the surface. "Rock?" Laura asked. Kevin shook his head. "The density is wrong. And look at this." He pointed to a line on the screen. "It's giving off a faint electromagnetic signal." Laura felt her heart beat faster. That was impossible. There was nothing down there but ice. Ice that had been frozen for thousands of years. She ordered the team to pull the drill back and widen the hole. They worked for hours, carefully melting and cutting through the ice, lowering cameras into the darkness below. What the cameras showed made Laura sit down in the snow. It was metal, a smooth, curved surface of dark metal, buried deep beneath the ice. The shape was too perfect, too deliberate to be natural. It looked like the hull of a ship. Laura called her supervisor, Dr. Daniel Carter, at the Research Institute back in the United States. She sent him the images and waited. An hour later, he called back. His voice was serious. "Don't touch anything," he said. "Don't tell anyone outside your team. I'm making some calls." Tech. Within 48 hours, the quiet research camp became something else entirely. Military helicopters landed on the ice. Soldiers in white winter gear set up a perimeter around the site. Scientists Laura had never met arrived with equipment she did not recognize. The whole operation was taken over by a man named Colonel Nathan Brooks, a tall officer with gray hair and cold eyes. Laura did not like being pushed aside, but she understood. This was no longer a simple research project. This was something much bigger. The excavation took 3 weeks. They brought in heavy machinery, heat generators, and cutting tools. Slowly, carefully, they melted away the ice and revealed what lay beneath. And with every passing day, Laura felt more and more like she was living inside a dream. The object was a spacecraft. There was no other word for it. It was roughly the size of a commercial airplane, with a sleek, angular design that looked nothing like any human technology. The hull was made of a dark material that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols were etched into the surface near what appeared to be an airlock door. Carbon dating of the surrounding ice gave them a number that made everyone go silent. The ship had been buried for over 12,000 years. That meant it had crashed here before the pyramids were built, before the first human cities, before written history itself. Laura spent hours just staring at it. She walked around its edges, touched its cold surface, and tried to understand what she was seeing. Her whole life, she had studied the past, but she had never imagined the past could include something like this. Colonel Brooks kept the site locked down. No information was allowed to leave. Everyone who worked there had to sign documents promising secrecy. Laura heard whispers that the president had been briefed, that world leaders were being informed in secret meetings. The world outside had no idea what was happening on this frozen patch of ice. One evening, Laura was examining the hull when she noticed something. There were marks on the metal. Deep grooves, and burns that ran along one side of the ship. She called over Dr. Megan Clark, a biologist who had been brought in to study any organic material they might find. "What do you think caused this?" Laura asked. Megan studied the marks for a long time. Her face was pale. "These look like weapon impacts," she said quietly. "This ship was attacked." Laura felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. She looked at the ancient spacecraft and thought about what that meant. 12,000 years ago, something had come to Earth. Something intelligent, something that built ships and traveled between stars, and something else had tried to destroy them. That night, Laura lay in her tent and could not sleep. She kept thinking about the ship buried in the ice, about the beings who had built it, about what had happened to them, and most of all, she kept thinking about one simple question: were they still inside? The answer would come soon enough. Colonel Brooks had assembled a team to enter the spacecraft. Engineers were working around the clock to find a way to open the airlock without damaging whatever was inside. In a few days, they would breach the hull and step into a world no human had ever seen. Laura had asked to be part of that team. Brooks had agreed, though he did not look happy about it. She was the one who had found the ship, after all. She deserved to see what was inside. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Laura thought about all the things humanity believed about itself. That they were alone in the universe. That their history was the only history that mattered. That the stars were just lights in the sky, beautiful but empty. All of that was about to change, and nothing would ever be the same again. The airlock door had not opened in 12,000 years. Samuel Price, the lead engineer on the project, had spent 9 days studying its mechanisms. The technology was unlike anything he had ever seen. There were no visible buttons, no handles, no seams where the door met the hull. It was as if the metal itself was meant to flow open when given the right command. On the 10th day, Samuel figured it out. The door responded to electromagnetic pulses in a specific pattern. He built a device that could produce the signal, and when he activated it, the airlock let out a soft hiss. Ancient air escaped from inside the ship, and the door slid open without a sound. Colonel Brooks assembled the entry team in front of the spacecraft. There were 4 of them. Dr. Laura Bennett, who had found the ship, Dr. Megan Clark, the biologist, Sergeant Ryan Mitchell, a soldier trained for hostile environments, and Samuel Price himself, who insisted on seeing his work through to the end. They wore protective suits and carried lights, cameras, and sensors. Nobody knew what they would find inside. Nobody knew if the air was safe, if there were traps, or if anything was still alive. Brooks gave them a short briefing and then stepped aside. "You have 2 hours," he said. "Document everything. Touch nothing unless absolutely necessary. And if anything goes wrong, get out immediately." Laura nodded and stepped through the airlock. The others followed close behind. The inside of the ship was dark. Their lights cut through the blackness and revealed a corridor made of the same dark metal as the hull. The walls curved gently, and strange patterns were carved into the surface. Laura ran her gloved hand along the carvings and wondered what they meant. Were they decorations? Instructions? Warnings? They moved slowly, checking every corner, recording everything they saw. The corridor led to a larger chamber that seemed to be a control room. There were seats arranged in a circle, facing a central platform. Above the platform, something flickered. Samuel approached carefully. "There's still power," he whispered. "After all this time, something is still running." He touched a panel near one of the seats, and the room came alive. Holographic displays appeared in the air, showing symbols and images that none of them could understand. A soft hum filled the space, and lights embedded in the walls began to glow with a pale blue color. Laura felt tears in her eyes. She was standing inside an alien spacecraft, surrounded by technology that humans could not have imagined. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Megan was examining the seats. "These were designed for humanoid beings," she said. "2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, but taller than us. And thinner." She pointed to the shape of the seats. which were longer and narrower than any human chair. They continued deeper into the ship. Past the control room, they found storage areas filled with containers, made of a material that felt like glass, but was stronger than steel. They found a room that might have been a kitchen, with devices that could have been used to prepare food. They found personal quarters with beds and shelves and objects that might have been books or photographs. Everywhere they looked, they saw signs of a civilization. A people who had lived and worked and traveled through the stars. A people who had come to Earth before humans learned to write. And then they found the crew. The chamber was at the heart of the ship, behind a heavy door that Samuel had to work hard to open. Inside, the air was colder than anywhere else. 7 pods lined the walls, each one about the size of a coffin, made of a clear material that let them see inside. Laura approached the nearest pod and looked down. Her breath caught in her throat. The being inside was humanoid, just as Megan had guessed. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, with features that were almost familiar. But its skin was pale gray, and its eyes were larger than human eyes. Its fingers were long and delicate, with an extra joint that gave them a graceful curve. It wore a uniform of some kind, dark blue with silver markings. It was dead. Laura could see that immediately. The pod's surface was dark, its power long gone. The being inside had not survived. They checked the other pods one by one. The second was the same, and the third, and the fourth. 6 of the 7 pods had failed at some point in the past 12,000 years, and their occupants had died in their sleep, frozen and preserved but lifeless. But the 7th pod was different. It sat at the far end of the chamber, and unlike the others, it still glowed with faint light. The surface was foggy with frost, but Laura could see movement inside. A slow, rhythmic rise and fall that could only mean one thing. "This one is alive," she said. The others gathered around her. Megan scanned the pod with her instruments and confirmed what Laura had seen. The being inside was in some kind of deep sleep. Its body functions slowed to almost nothing, but it was alive. Ryan spoke into his radio. "Colonel, we have a survivor." The response came immediately. "Say again?" "One of the crew is still alive. Some kind of stasis pod. It's been keeping them preserved all this time." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Brooks said, "Get back here. Now. We need to discuss this." They returned to the surface, but Laura kept looking back at the ship. Somewhere inside that ancient vessel, a being from another world was sleeping. Waiting. It had been waiting for 12,000 years, alone in the dark and cold, while human civilization rose and fell, and rose again, above its head. The question now was simple. What would happen when it woke up? The debate lasted for days. Some officials wanted to leave the pod sealed. Others wanted to destroy the ship and everything inside it. But Laura and Megan argued for a different choice. They argued for waking the survivor. "This is the greatest discovery in human history," Laura said during one of the many meetings. "We have a chance to communicate with an intelligent being from another world. To learn about the universe, to understand where this ship came from and why it crashed here. If we destroy that chance out of fear, we will regret it forever." Colonel Brooks was not convinced. "And if this thing wakes up and decides we are a threat? If it has weapons we don't understand? If it calls for help from others of its kind? Then we will deal with that," Laura said. "But we cannot let fear make this decision for us." In the end, the choice went to the highest levels of government. Presidents and prime ministers debated in secret. Scientists submitted reports. Military leaders gave their assessments. And finally, weeks later, the order came. They would wake the survivor. Laura stood beside the pod as the process began. Samuel had figured out how the stasis system worked, and Megan was ready to provide medical care if needed. Soldiers stood at the edges of the room, weapons ready. The pod began to warm. The frost on its surface melted away, and slowly, the being inside began to stir. Its eyes opened, large, dark eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. It looked up at the ceiling, then turned its head, and saw Laura standing beside it. For a long moment, neither of them moved. two species, separated by thousands of years and countless light years, looking at each other for the first time. Then the being raised one of its long, delicate hands and pressed it against the inside of the pod. Laura did not know what the gesture meant, but she raised her own hand and pressed it against the surface from the outside. The being made a sound. It might have been a word. It might have been a name. Laura did not understand, but she smiled anyway. And somewhere in those alien eyes, she thought she saw understanding. The first contact had been made. The alien did not speak any human language. This was expected, but it still made those first days incredibly difficult. The being would make sounds, gestures, and expressions that meant nothing to the scientists watching. And the scientists would speak and point and draw pictures that meant nothing to the alien. Dr. Megan Clark spent most of her time monitoring the survivor's health. The being was weak after 12,000 years in stasis. Its body needed time to recover. It ate small amounts of a paste they found in the ship's storage containers, drank water carefully, and slept often. But even in its weakened state, it watched everything around it with sharp, intelligent eyes. Laura was determined to find a way to communicate. She started with mathematics. Numbers were universal. 1 rock plus 1 rock equals 2 rocks. This was true on Earth, and it had to be true wherever this being came from. She sat across from the alien with a pile of small stones. She placed one stone on the ground. Then she placed another. Then she pointed to both and held up 2 fingers. The alien watched her closely. She repeated the process. 1 stone, another stone, 2 fingers. On the 3rd day, the alien picked up a stone, then another, and held up 2 of its long fingers. Laura felt her heart jump. It understood. They built from there. Addition, subtraction, simple equations drawn in the dust. The alien learned quickly, faster than Laura had thought possible. Within a week, they had moved beyond basic math to simple pictures and symbols. A circle for the sun, a smaller circle for Earth, a drawing of the ship. The alien seemed to understand what had happened. It knew it was on Earth. It knew a long time had passed. Sometimes, when Laura showed it pictures of its dead crew members, its large eyes would grow wet, and it would turn away. Whatever species this being belonged to, it felt grief just like humans did. They decided to give the alien a name. The marking on its uniform included a symbol that looked something like a key or a hook. Laura started calling the being Keeper, and the name stuck. Communication improved slowly but steadily. Samuel Price built a translation program that learned to recognize Keeper's sounds and gestures and match them with meanings. Megan taught Keeper basic English words, and Keeper taught them words from its own language. A flowing tongue, full of soft sounds and musical tones. After 6 weeks, real conversation became possible. It was slow and full of mistakes, but they could finally ask questions and receive answers. Laura was the one who asked the most important question. "Where did you come from?" she said, pointing up at the stars visible through the tent's transparent ceiling. "Why did you come to Earth?" Keeper was silent for a long moment. Then it began to speak, and Samuel's program translated its words into English. "My people are called the Valanthi. We came from a world far from here, in a part of the sky you cannot see. For many generations, we were part of a great community. Many species, many worlds, all connected. We shared knowledge. We shared peace. We thought the universe was kind." Laura listened carefully. Megan recorded every word. Colonel Brooks stood in the corner with his arms crossed. "But we were wrong," Keeper continued. "There is something else in the universe. Something that is not kind. We call them the Dominion." Keeper's voice grew heavy with pain. It described an empire that spread across the stars like a disease. The Dominion conquered every species it encountered. Those who surrendered were made into slaves. Those who resisted were destroyed completely. World after world fell to their fleets. Species that had existed for millions of years were wiped out in a single generation. "The Valanthi tried to fight," Keeper said. But we had known only peace for thousands of years. We had forgotten how to make war. Our weapons were old. Our soldiers were few. We fell like all the others. Laura felt cold. What happened to your world? Keeper closed its eyes. Gone. Burned. My people are scattered now, hiding in the dark places between stars, waiting for the end. The room was silent. Brooks stepped forward. Why did you come to Earth? Keeper looked at him. We sent ships to the edges of the galaxy. To young worlds. Primitive worlds. Worlds the Dominion had not yet found. We wanted to warn them. To tell them what was coming, so they could prepare. Earth was one of those worlds, Laura said. Yes. 12,000 years ago. Your people were just beginning. You had fire. Tools. Language. You were growing. We thought if we warned you, gave you time, you might be ready when the Dominion came. But you crashed, Megan said. Keeper nodded slowly. A Dominion hunter found us. They attacked our ship as we entered your sky. We fell. My crew died. I was the only one the stasis pod saved. It paused. I failed. The warning was never delivered. Laura reached out and touched Keeper's arm gently. You didn't fail. You survived. And now you can tell us. Yes, Keeper said. But I am 12,000 years late. And the Dominion is still out there. They move slowly. But they always move forward. Eventually, they will come to this part of the galaxy. They will find Earth. And then, it did not finish the sentence. It did not need to. Colonel Brooks's face was hard. How long do we have? Keeper considered the question. I do not know. Perhaps 100 years. Perhaps 1,000. Perhaps less. The Dominion does not hurry. They do not need to. They have never lost. The weight of those words hung in the air. Somewhere out in the vastness of space, an empire of conquerors was slowly spreading. And one day, they would reach Earth. But something strange happened in the days that followed. As Keeper learned more about humanity, its despair began to change. Laura showed it books about human history. Megan explained human biology. Samuel demonstrated human technology. And with each new piece of information, Keeper's large eyes grew wider. You went from stone tools to this, Keeper said one day, gesturing at the computers and machines around them. In only 12,000 years? Yes, Laura said. Is that unusual? Keeper stared at her. The Volanthi took 100,000 years to reach the same level. Most species take longer. You have done this so fast. Too fast. It should not be possible, Laura smiled. Humans are impatient. But Keeper did not smile back. It was thinking hard, processing everything it had learned. And when it finally spoke again, its words changed everything. My people sent me to warn you, to help you prepare for darkness. But now I see something I did not expect. Keeper looked at Laura, then at Brooks, then at the others in the room. Your species is different. You grow fast. You fight hard. You never stop pushing forward. The Volanthi knew peace. You know war. You have been fighting each other since you were born. That's not really something to be proud of, Megan said quietly. No, Keeper agreed. But it may be the thing that saves you. The Dominion has never faced a species like yours. They have conquered peoples who knew only peace. They have never conquered peoples who knew only war. Keeper stood up slowly, its tall form towering over the humans. Its eyes held something new now. Not despair. Something else. Perhaps I was not meant to warn you, Keeper said. Perhaps I was meant to ask for your help. The room was silent. Laura looked at Colonel Brooks. Brooks looked back at her. Neither of them knew what to say, but both of them knew that the universe had just become a much bigger place, and humanity's role in it had just changed forever. The news spread through the highest levels of government like fire through dry grass. Within weeks, every major world leader had been briefed on the discovery. The alien spacecraft. The survivor. The warning about the Dominion, and the terrifying truth that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. The reactions were as different as the nations themselves. Some leaders called for immediate action. They wanted to build weapons, train armies, and prepare Earth for war. Others demanded that the information be released to the public, arguing that all of humanity had the right to know what was coming. A few refused to believe any of it, dismissing the whole thing as a hoax or a misunderstanding. And some, Laura learned with disgust, wanted to destroy the spacecraft and kill Keeper. They saw the alien as a threat, a source of dangerous knowledge that would only cause panic. Better to bury the secret and pretend it never happened. Colonel Brooks fought hard against that last group. Whatever his personal feelings about Keeper, he understood that ignoring a threat did not make it go away. The Dominion was out there. Pretending otherwise would only leave humanity unprepared. In the end, a compromise was reached. The information would remain classified for now. A global defense initiative would be created in secret, funded by the major powers, and hidden from public view. Scientists and military leaders from around the world would work together to study the alien technology and prepare for possible conflict. It was not a perfect solution. Laura knew that secrets this big could not stay hidden forever. But for now, it was enough. The research facility grew larger. More scientists arrived. More equipment was brought in. The frozen camp became a permanent base. With heated buildings and advanced laboratories, Keeper was moved to a comfortable room with everything it needed, and slowly, the work of understanding began. Samuel Price led the team studying the spacecraft's technology. What they found amazed them. The ship used a power source they could not fully understand, something that drew energy from the very fabric of space itself. Its materials were stronger and lighter than anything humans had ever created. Its computer systems processed information in ways that made Earth's best supercomputers look like toys. But the most important discovery was the ship's database. Keeper helped them access it, and what they found inside was a treasure beyond imagination. Star charts, showing thousands of worlds, scientific knowledge accumulated over millions of years, the history of the Volanthe and dozens of other species that had been part of the great galactic community. Laura spent hours studying the records. She learned about species that lived in the hearts of stars, about civilizations that had built structures larger than planets, about wars fought with weapons that could crack worlds in half, and about the Dominion, the shadow that had consumed them all. The Dominion records were incomplete. The Volanthe had never managed to learn much about their enemy, but what they knew was disturbing. The Dominion was not a single species but a collection of many, all serving a ruling class that had conquered them long ago. They spread slowly but surely, absorbing everything in their path. And they never, ever stopped. Why? Laura asked Keeper one evening. Why do they conquer? What do they want? Keeper thought for a long moment. We do not know. Some believed they simply enjoy power. Others thought they were driven by fear, a need to control everything so nothing could threaten them. Perhaps there is no reason. Perhaps they conquer because it is the only thing they know how to do. Laura found that answer somehow worse than any other. An enemy with a clear motive could be understood, maybe even reasoned with. But an enemy that destroyed simply because destruction was its nature, that was something else entirely. Meanwhile, Megan Clark was studying Keeper and comparing its biology to human biology. The similarities were striking. Both species had evolved to breathe oxygen, drink water, and eat similar foods. Both had similar senses and similar brain structures. It was as if life, wherever it arose, followed certain patterns. But the differences were important too. Keeper's species was longer lived than humans, often surviving for 300 years or more. Their bodies were more efficient, requiring less food and sleep, and their minds worked differently, processing information in a more linear and methodical way. You think in straight lines? Megan told Keeper. Very logical, very careful. Humans think in curves and spirals. We jump from idea to idea. We make connections that don't seem to make sense until suddenly they do. This is why you advance so quickly, Keeper said. You do not wait for one discovery to finish before starting the next. You work on 100 problems at once and let the solutions crash into each other. Is that good? Megan asked. It is chaotic. It is dangerous. It leads to as many mistakes as breakthroughs. Keeper paused. But it is also very, very fast. The Dominion has never faced anything like it. Colonel Brooks was focused on a different question. He wanted to know if humans could fight the Dominion. Keeper helped him access the ship's tactical records, and together, they studied every battle ever fought against the enemy. The results were not encouraging. The Dominion had never lost a war. They had superior numbers, superior technology, and centuries of experience. Every species that had tried to resist them had been crushed. But Brooks noticed something interesting. The species that had fought the Dominion were all peaceful by nature. They had known thousands of years of cooperation before the enemy arrived. When war came, they were unprepared. Their weapons were outdated. Their tactics were crude. They fought bravely, but they fought like amateurs. What would happen, Brooks asked Keeper, if they faced a species that had been fighting wars for its entire existence? A species that had never stopped developing new weapons? A species that thought about conflict every single day? Keeper looked at him strangely. No such species exists in the records. It does now, Brooks said. Keeper spent the next several days learning about human military history. Laura watched as its expression changed from curiosity to shock to something approaching disbelief. It read about ancient battles fought with swords and spears, about wars that killed millions, about weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. You developed nuclear weapons, Keeper said slowly, and then you did not destroy yourselves. We came close, Laura admitted, several times, but you survived. You pulled back from the edge. Keeper shook its head. The Volanthe would not have survived. If we had created such weapons, we would have used them once and then abandoned them forever out of shame. You created them, used them, and then built more. And yet you are still here. We're stubborn, Laura said. You are something more than that. Keeper looked at her with those large, dark eyes. You are survivors. Your entire history is one long story of survival against impossible odds. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters that would have ended other species. And yet you keep going. You keep growing. You refuse to die. Laura did not know what to say. She had never thought of human history that way. To her, it had always seemed like a story of failure and cruelty as much as success and kindness. But Keeper saw something different. Keeper saw a species that had been knocked down 1,000 times and had gotten up 1,001. The Dominion has conquered many worlds, Keeper said. But they have never faced a world like Earth. They have never faced a species like humanity. I do not know if you can win. But I know that you will fight. And I know that you will make them bleed. Laura smiled grimly. Is that supposed to be encouraging? It is the truth, Keeper said. And the truth is, all I have to offer. That night, Laura stood outside the base and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was spreading. World by world, species by species, they were swallowing the galaxy. And one day, they would come to Earth. But humanity would be ready. They had Keeper's knowledge. They had the spacecraft's technology. And they had something no other species had ever had. A history of war. A culture of conflict. A stubborn, relentless refusal to accept defeat. The Dominion had conquered species that knew only peace. Now they would meet a species that knew war in its bones. Laura did not know if humanity would win. But she knew they would fight. And she knew that the Dominion had never faced anything like them. For the first time since the discovery, she felt something like hope. 2 years had passed since the discovery of the spacecraft. The secret base in Greenland had become one of the most advanced research facilities on Earth. Scientists from every major nation worked side by side, studying alien technology and preparing humanity for the challenges ahead. Samuel Price had achieved something remarkable. Using the knowledge from the Volanthe database and human engineering skills, his team had built a deep space communication array. It was massive, covering nearly a square mile of frozen ground, its sensors pointing at the stars. The array could detect signals from across the galaxy, listening for any sign of intelligent life. If the Dominion is out there, we need to know where they are, Samuel explained during the unveiling ceremony. And if anyone else survived, we need to find them too. The array was activated on a cold morning in March. Laura stood in the control room with Keeper, Colonel Brooks, and a dozen other officials. The screens flickered to life, and data began to pour in. Most of it was noise, the natural radio waves of stars and planets, the background hum of the universe itself. But within hours, they found something else. Samuel's eyes went wide as he studied the readings. We're picking up artificial signals, structured patterns. This is not natural. No, Laura felt her heart race. Where are they coming from? Samuel pointed to a star chart on the main screen. Multiple sources. At least 7 distinct signals from different parts of the galaxy. Keeper stepped forward, its tall form casting a shadow across the displays. It studied the patterns carefully, and then its eyes filled with an emotion Laura had never seen before, something between joy and disbelief. These are not Dominion signals, Keeper said softly. These are survivor codes. Emergency beacons used by species that escaped the conquest. I recognize some of them. The Veth, the Solarans, the Morthali. They are still alive. The room erupted in excited chatter. For 2 years, they had assumed the worst. That the Dominion had destroyed everything. That humanity was alone in a galaxy of ashes. But now they knew the truth. Others had survived. Scattered and hidden. But alive. Can we communicate with them? Brooks asked. Samuel nodded slowly. The array was designed to receive signals, but we can modify it to transmit as well. It would take a few months, but yes, we can reach out. Laura looked at Keeper. What would we say? Keeper was silent for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice was heavy with emotion. For 10,000 years, the survivors have hidden in darkness. They have waited for death that never quite came. They have lost hope. They believe they are alone. That the great community is gone forever. That nothing remains but scattered refugees waiting for the end. It turned to face Laura, and its large eyes were wet with tears. You would tell them that they are not alone. That something new has risen on a small blue world at the edge of the galaxy. That hope is not dead. Laura felt the weight of that moment. This was not just about humanity anymore. This was about the entire galaxy. About countless species that had suffered and lost and given up. About a light that could be rekindled after 10,000 years of darkness. Colonel, she said, we need to send a message. Brooks was quiet for a long time. Laura knew what he was thinking. Sending a message would reveal Earth's location. If the Dominion intercepted it, they would know where to find humanity. The risk was enormous, but Laura also knew that hiding forever was not an option. Sooner or later, the Dominion would find Earth anyway. When that day came, humanity would need allies. They would need a coalition of survivors fighting together instead of dying alone. Do it, Brooks said finally. Prepare a transmission. Over the next 3 months, a team of linguists, scientists, and diplomats worked together to craft humanity's first interstellar message. Keeper helped translate it into the common language of the old galactic community. The message was simple but powerful. It introduced Earth and humanity. It explained that they had found a Valanthi ship and awakened its survivor. It acknowledged the threat of the Dominion. And then it said something that made Keeper fall silent. We are not hiding, the message declared. We are not waiting for the end. We are building. We are preparing. We are ready to stand against the darkness. And we are looking for others who will stand with us. If you are out there, if you have survived, if you still have the strength to fight, then we invite you to join us. The old community is gone, but a new one can be born. Together, we can face what is coming. Together, we can resist. Together, we can win. The day of the transmission arrived. Laura stood beside Keeper in the control room as the array powered up. Samuel made the final adjustments. Brooks gave the order. The message fired into the void. It would take years, perhaps decades, for the signal to reach its destinations, and more years for any response to return. Laura knew she might never live to see what came of it. But that did not matter. What mattered was that the message had been sent, that humanity had taken the first step. Keeper stood beside her, watching the screens that tracked the signal's progress across the stars. Its expression was strange, a mixture of wonder and something like pride. "Your species is remarkable," Keeper said. "Any other would have hidden, would have stayed silent, and hoped the darkness would pass them by. But you have chosen to speak, to lead, to offer hope to those who have none." Laura shrugged. "Hiding was never really our style." "No," Keeper agreed. "It is not." It paused. "I have studied your history. I have seen your wars, your cruelty, your failures. You are a violent and dangerous species. You have caused great suffering to yourselves and to your world." "That's true," Laura admitted. "But you are also brave. You are creative. You refuse to give up, even when all logic says you should. You fight against odds that would break any other people, and you win." Keeper looked at her. "The Dominion has conquered species that were wiser than you, more advanced than you, more peaceful than you. But they have never faced a species that was more stubborn, more relentless, more absolutely determined to survive." Laura smiled. "You make us sound almost heroic." "Perhaps you are," Keeper said. "Or perhaps you are simply too foolish to know when you are beaten. Either way, the result is the same. You will not go quietly into extinction. You will fight. And in fighting, you will give others the courage to fight as well." Outside the control room, the sun was setting over the frozen landscape. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the first stars were beginning to appear. Laura thought about those stars, about the signals racing toward them, about the survivors waiting in the darkness. She thought about the Dominion, the shadow that had consumed the galaxy. And she thought about humanity, the strange and stubborn species that had risen from nothing in the blink of a cosmic eye. They were young. They were inexperienced. They had only just learned that the universe was full of wonders and horrors beyond their imagination. But they were also fighters. They had been fighting since the first human picked up a stone and used it as a weapon. They had been fighting since the first tribe defended its territory against invaders. They had been fighting for survival since the very beginning. Now they would fight for something bigger, for the galaxy itself, for the survivors hiding in the darkness, for the hope that had been lost 10,000 years ago. Laura did not know if humanity would win. No one could know that. The Dominion was vast and powerful, and had never been defeated. But she knew that humanity would try. They would stand up, they would push back, they would show the galaxy that resistance was possible. And somewhere out there, in hidden stations and refugee fleets, ancient receivers were flickering to life. For the first time in millennia, the broken peoples of the galaxy were hearing something they had forgotten could exist. A voice in the darkness. A hand reaching out. A promise that the night would not last forever. Hope. Keeper turned to Laura as the last light of the sun faded from the sky. "You are either very brave or very foolish to have done this." Laura thought about the question. About everything humanity had survived. About everything they had built. About the long and bloody and beautiful story of their species. Then she smiled. "We have always been both," she said. "That is how we survive." And across the stars, in the cold and endless darkness, the message spread. A small voice from a small world, speaking words that the galaxy had not heard in 10,000 years. "We are here. We are not afraid. We will stand with you." The age of hiding was over. The age of resistance had begun.